Welcome to the Doctor's Corner with Dr. Klein and JONELLE ELGAWAY. And now, here's your hosts, JONELLE ELGAWAY and Dr. Klein.
Good evening and welcome to the Doctor's Corner on Caw 360 Network with co-host Dr. Klein and I'm JONELLE ELGAWAY. There are two ways to listen into tonight's program: through our website www.cawnatation.com or YouTube channel The Doctor's Corner. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get reminders of when we are on live. Dr. Klein loves to hear from you and answer all your questions in our mailbag. If you have future mailbag questions, please email them to jonelle.elgaway@caw360.com. If anyone would like to call in with a question this evening, you can do so at 415-403-2715. Tonight's guests are Bruce Sando and Ted Steranko. I think I got that wrong, but I'll ask them when we pull them through. Before we get into tonight's show, though, I want to introduce and welcome my co-host, Dr. Klein. Welcome, Dr. Klein. How are you this evening?
I'm just dandy.
Before we start, is there anything newsworthy that has occurred recently that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I like to skim the science news during the week, not just about opiates, but I thought this was interesting, published in Medscape. Medscape, by the way, is not an official doctor website. It sounds like it is. It's a blog, and people can write what they want. Anyway, the name of this article is, "Does consuming bacon increase mania risk?" I'm screwed. I think life is about bacon and donuts. Duck Donuts, you can actually buy a donut with bacon on it. So I think this mania thing with bacon is just out of control. So be careful if you're eating bacon. Next.
All right. We have a few mailbag questions. The first one is, for people with lifelong genetic disorders that are irrefutably cause chronic pain, how do patients go about getting a palliative care exemption through their doctors so that the CDC guidelines don't hinder their care and the doctor doesn't fear the DEA? My doctors seem confused about this.
Palliative care is what doctors have been doing for thousands of years. If you can't treat the disease, you treat the symptoms of the disease. If you have pneumonia, before they had antibiotics, you would use cold cloths and aspirin. So if you have a chronic, terrible, painful disease and you can't treat it, the only thing you can do is relieve the symptoms. And thank God, Mother Nature gave us, as Roy Mosler said, God's own medicine. Out of a plant comes this black, sticky tar that for 3,500 to 5,000 years, we have some references 5,000 years ago, it has worked to relieve pain, and there's nothing else to relieve pain. So palliative care is simply a diagnosis. It is Z51.5, Z as in zebra, and what it is three components. One, you have a disease you can't treat. Two, it's generating symptoms that if you controlled the symptoms, your life would be better. And that includes vomiting and diarrhea, all kinds of things that people get with their chronic disease. The most common thing is pain. And lastly, the third quality is it may or may not have an impact on your lifespan. May or may not. See how I got out of that? The big confusion is with hospice, which it's not. Being afraid of the DEA, the DEA is not, they're not medical people, and they kind of shy away from stuff, and they're not interested in palliative care. As far as they're concerned, if you have a palliative care exemption, what that means is you do not need to adhere to state, if it's a exemption in the state, or the CDC guidelines. It's in the first sentence of the CDC guidelines. None of what is published in the CDC guidelines applies to you if you have palliative care, and it protects the doctor. Now, there's another little article here I'm just going to bring up quickly. Naloxone shall be prescribed to high-risk patients, say federal agencies. Who's high risk? Oh, people that take too much. Too much opiates are at high risk. High risk for what? Oh, overdosing, says the CDC. Who's overdosing? Oh, junkies. Oh, I see. Junkies are overdosing because of high doses. In fact, in the general population, going to a doctor's office and getting a prescription for opiates last year, we think there were 500 people who died as a result of overdose. That's 1 per million. People are not dying from overdoses. It's a myth. Where did this come from? It came from the CDC talking about overdose deaths and not explaining to everybody that all their overdose deaths, or 95% of them, were street addicts dying because we've denied them health care. So, naloxone should be co-prescribed with high-risk patients. How high a dose? These are $300 each. How much money are they going to spend on naloxone that's not needed, right? This is like giving everybody an insulin cartridge just in case their blood sugar looks funny, and they can shoot up with some insulin. It's just as ridiculous. So that's the end of my ranting and raving.
Okay. And next question. My PCP stopped writing my pain meds after 10 years of compliance with our pain contract 2 months ago. I've only found doctors who want to give me Suboxone here in New Jersey. My doctor is pushing it. I have pain. I'm not an addict. Why is Suboxone being pushed on me? I'm in agony and I've been crying in pain for 6 weeks. I need help.
Well, Suboxone is just an opiate like all the other opiates. It has a few little characteristics that are different, but I asked some addicts, I said, is there a lot of Suboxone on the street? Yep. Okay, so if you want to find out if something works, you just ask addicts what's on the street and the price. So Suboxone is an abused drug, which means it works. And there's all this other kind of stuff about, you can't overdose with it and everything, and that's bull. It's just another opiate. It has a little bit of a different property on the receptors. It kind of kicks out the other drugs and causes you to go into withdrawal, and maybe our guest can talk about that. But Suboxone is an excellent painkiller. Go ahead. You know, if you put in Suboxone on Google, you're going to get about 19 ads for pharmacies, $400 a month. But, you know, it's $1,200 a month for oxycodone, long release ER, $1,200 a month. So I don't know, $400 a month. So to go for it, just go for it. What the heck? I mean, doctors believe that this is a safe drug from the police because it's sanctioned by the federal government. So there's poor reasoning there. It's sanctioned by the federal government for treatment of true addiction, as we've talked about before. So caller or a person who wrote into the mailbag, don't be afraid of Suboxone. Take it. It's better than nothing.
Okay. And last question. My doctor that treated my fibromyalgia pain for 11 years retired. My new doctor group doesn't believe in pain medication except for stage 4 cancer. I went through a forced taper off all pain medications. How should a chronic pain patient in this situation go about successfully finding a new pain management provider without coming across as a drug seeker? Insurance is not an issue in this case, FYI.
Yeah, you know, it's like being a baseball player. You've got to be scouted, and then you've got to make a pitch. So what you do is you talk to your friends. You use the name of a friend and say, my friend Barbara recommended you as a nice doctor, and here's my story, and you write it down and you send it in to the doctor's office by U.S. mail. Because if you do that, it's going to go into the inbox and it's going to get read. If you send emails and stuff, it's not going to get read. But letters, doctors are very provincial. A letter will work. And so what you're doing is you're giving the doctor a chance to save face. So he doesn't or she doesn't have to reject you right away. They can read your little blurb, and guess what? You're going to have to write a good blurb. This is what journalists do when they're trying to get stories published. They send in a pitch, which outlines what they're going to talk about. So don't go on and on. Stick with 1 or 2 diagnoses. It doesn't make your case any better to list 22 diagnoses because that scares doctors off. They think, good Lord, I can't take care of somebody like this. So you just list your two primary, you list the fact you have insurance and what kind of insurance you have. Doctors are worried that they're going to take home people and then never get paid. And, it's tough. I think your doctor who dumped you need to report him to the Board of Registration in Medicine. It's up to the doctor if they're cutting you off a medication to help you find somebody else. That's just general ethics in medicine. If a doctor retires, they give you a list of doctors and they call around to the other physicians, say, hey, can you take a few of these patients? And so doctors that just cut you off, this is just raw cruelty because people suffer. This is no different than cutting people off insulin. Hey, I don't believe this insulin works. We're just cutting you off. Go find another doctor. These people need to be taken to task, and the way you do it is with the Board of Registration in your state because they hold the licensing. I'm more afraid of my board than I am the DEA because the board can pull my license. The DEA can pull my narcotics license, but they cannot pull my general license to practice medicine. So you're in a tough spot, and don't feel bad. We think there's 5 to 6 million people in the same spot, and nobody's refuted that, and nobody is checking it out. So I'm going to make a little general announcement right now that I thought of it. The FDA is in charge of everything. The FDA is on our side. The FDA realized the horrors of what's transpired in the last 3 years with 5 to 6 million people, lives ruined, 40 people we know of dead from overdose because they got cut off their pain medicine. How horrible is that? That's doctor-related killing, isn't it? So what you can do is you can write the FDA a simple little website, info, I-N-F-O, at fda.gov. And I sent something the other day, and I said, not only are opiates being tapered inappropriately, but lots of other drugs, including Xanax and benzodiazepines and muscle relaxants and anticonvulsants, all are just being tapered, just cut off. All of those drugs are dangerous, much more dangerous actually than opiates being cut off abruptly. You can die from stopping Xanax too quickly because it's short acting. So info at fda.gov, start sending them little brief summaries if you've been cut off. I have thus a painful disease, and list one disease. I have been abruptly terminated from these drugs. I just wanted you to know. See, they need to start counting. Somebody needs to start counting, and nobody listens to me. I mean, it's pretty simple. We got 5 independent surveys to show that 65% of people have been taken off their medicine, and we know there's 10 million. Well, do the math. This involves millions of people. Millions. So, info at fda.gov. Okay, back to reality here.
Okay. And I just want to remind everybody, if you do call in with questions this evening, if you could please stay on topic. You're welcome to write into our mailbag or ask another time, but we would like to stay on topic. So tonight we are going to be covering medication to DNA compatibility testing. And I would like to introduce our special guest, Ted Steranko. Is that correct, Ted?
Ted Steranko, you said
Steranko.
right.
All right. And Bruce Sando, welcome you both. How are you both tonight?
Thank you very much. This is Bruce Sando for inviting us. It's a subject near and dear to my heart, so let's get started. You have some questions for us.
Well, can you just share a little bit about your background and who you are so we can get an idea first? Bruce, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. My name is Bruce Sando. I am a pharmacist in Baltimore, Maryland. I have worked everywhere and done everything in pharmacy. I'm currently at the University of Maryland Medical Center as a clinical pharmacist. I worked retail also, so I've dealt with a lot of clients that have dependency issues and pain issues, and worked with those people and watched as my fellow pharmacist told them, oh, we don't have any. When they had, just because for some reason they decided this patient didn't need their drugs and they were too lazy to verify prescriptions, which is my personal pet peeve. I'm sure you've all been through that. And now I have started 4 years ago getting into the pharmacogenomic business, which let me give you a brief summary of what that is. It's pharmacology and genetics. So it's pharmacogenomics. And what we do is we study drugs and how your particular DNA will shape the use of those drugs in your body. So it's what's also called personal medicine or precision medicine, and it's directed toward you, not the masses, but you as an individual. What's the best drug for you? What's the best dose? How often do you need to take it? Not what the average person does. I haven't yet met the average person, but what you as the individual needs. So that's what I've been doing. And Ted, let's talk about Ted.
Okay. My name is Ted Steranko, and originally from Reading, Pennsylvania. I moved down to Baltimore, back in the early 80s. I was a lab tech in the Air Force, and I was very fortunate to not be part of the Vietnam conflict. I missed having that action. And in 1979, I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. I was a genetics minor, graduated Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude. Woohoo! That and $5 will get me a nice cup of coffee at Starbucks. The last 30 years, I've been a life insurance broker, and I've always loved things health-related. So when Bruce told me about pharmacogenomics, I saw that this new technology could really help save thousands of lives. That's why I became involved.
So you guys are business partners.
I work with
we are.
Bruce. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're business partners. And Ted, you came down from the very first medical school in the country, and you ended up at the second oldest medical school.
That's true.
So you guys are working together, and I'll have you know that I personally knew Mendel, and I showed him about these peas in his garden, and if he just kind of cross-pollinated them, he would get all these funny peas. Mendel's manuscripts were almost lost. The first geneticist, Watson and Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for DNA. You know how many experiments they did over their career? None.
Really? Okay.
They just took experiments from somebody else and got the Nobel Prize. But they figured out the little helix, and now we know that genes control everything. Even though I'm only 39, look, I'm prematurely bald. These are genes. These are genes speaking. I guess I heard that we're only different from the dinosaur by 0.5% of the genetic material. But the exciting thing that you guys are working on is something we've noticed in clinical medicine for some time. I used to follow the papers on Plavix, which is a drug like aspirin to thin out your blood and help prevent clots, especially after people stick little pipes in your arteries and things like that when you don't want them to clot off. And every time I read an article, I thought, something's fishy here. I think what was fishy was that people responded differently to the drug, and they couldn't really iron it all out. You have to do a gigantic study, with like 1,000 people in order to get those differences ironed out. And they never did. And as a clinician...
Klein, let's talk about Plavix.
Sure. Okay, go ahead.
Plavix is a very important drug in pharmacogenomics. It is used in virtually every case of a person having a infarction or a heart attack. It's where blood or your platelets clot inside your arterial arteries, or if you're having a stent put in, they're given typically aspirin and Plavix. So Plavix is there to protect you from having a second and a third heart attack and ultimately death. Now, those studies have been done, and here's the sad part about it. 30% of the people that are put on Plavix, cannot metabolize that drug into what's called an active metabolite. So we have a pro drug, which is Plavix, pro meaning like first or before, So it actually has to get broken down in your liver, into what's called an active metabolite or the active form of the drug. So if you don't have that enzyme, guess what? You're taking a placebo. that drug is totally ineffective for you. So I had a client the other day in the hospital, and I was looking at him, and I was looking at his drug list, his profile, and I see that this guy had 4 years ago had a heart attack, and they put him on Plavix. And 2 years ago, he had another heart attack, and he's still on Plavix. Okay. And he's looking pretty bad now. He's back in the hospital. And I'm talking to this guy, and I said, I told him about pharmacogenomic testing, and he really wanted to have it. So I went and I talked to his doctor, and I said, this would be great for this guy because he has a lot of different drugs that really make a difference if you can test and see which is the best dose and stuff. And the doctor said it wasn't necessary. Okay, this blew me away. It wasn't necessary because if he ran that test, okay, that wouldn't, because it's a managed care patient, which means that they're given a bucket of money and said, here, spend it on our patient. If there's anything left, it's yours. If there's nothing left, too bad. And what happened was the doctor refused to do the test because, and he told me it will reduce my reimbursement from the insurance company.
Nice.
Now this is a guy that's had 2 heart attacks, and he's talking to me about his reimbursement. I just love it. But most doctors, in fact, I talked to another cardiologist about another one of his patients, and I said, when you give this drug, don't you worry about the fact that it won't work for 30% of people. That's a lot. Of all the people who've had heart attacks, 30%, that's millions. And he goes, yeah, I just pray it's the right one. And there's another drug called Brilinta that does not have this same problem. And I said, why don't you use Brilinta, okay, on all your patients? He goes, well, that's a brand name drug and it's really expensive, and I have to go and get a prior authorization in order to give that drug. And it's such a pain in the butt. All the paperwork I have to do, and I'm sitting there going, would he say that if it was his father or his mother or his brother? Would he talk about the paperwork that was involved? Now, the beauty of pharmacogenomics, if we do the test, guess what? We'll know for sure which the right drug to give. And if they need a prior authorization, they just send the test in and it's automatically done. They can see it. They don't have to make explanations or nothing. They can see right there that this is the correct drug to give, the Brilinta or one of the other drugs. So that's my little Plavix story for you. So proceed.
Well,
I'm sorry I interrupted you, but proceed.
No, that's okay. We just won't ask you back on the show. But don't worry, you can interrupt all you want. Clinically, I've always been concerned about aspirin. When they came out and said that, you only need a teeny-weeny 1/5 of an aspirin, 42 milligrams, I started asking my patients, do you bleed when you shave? If the answer was no, I became concerned they weren't getting enough aspirin. So, 42 milligrams is good for everybody? No, it wasn't. So I told my patients, go ahead and double it, and see what happens. And then, the little bleeding with shaving. They used to do an old-fashioned IV bleeding time, which we probably should still be doing. Now, it's inaccurate. Well, it's not that inaccurate. A lot of blood tests are inaccurate, but you can certainly use it as a way to check and make sure you're anticoagulated. So now you're saying that if they don't want to do an IV bleeding test, they're taking Plavix, then you've got a way to show that it's working short of a blood level. Now, I would think if you could get a blood level, you'd be okay. You wouldn't need to do this. But these are for drugs like Plavix. You don't do blood levels. And so it's a terrible thing to be taking a medicine to anticoagulate that we know works and it saves lives, to have to put up with our healthcare system. Universal healthcare. Oh, did I just say that? No, that was a pretty good example of why we need to do that. It's not the doctors, it's the HMOs. We deal with this all the time with pain medicines. People can't afford to treat their diabetes anymore because of healthcare profiteering, and everybody just talks about it. It's like the weather. So what other, let me just explain to the audience the beauty of your liver. Okay, you've got this liver in your body, And it does a whole lot of different things. It protects you against infection. But the most amazing thing it does, you put a foreign substance in your mouth, a drug, a pill, your liver figures out a way to get rid of it. Because your liver doesn't know that it's a medicine. Your liver just knows that it's some kind of foreign chemical. So if you take something that's poisonous to the liver can't keep up and dies. But for most medicines, like Plavix and like opiate pain medicine, your liver diagnoses its chemical structure and then figures out a way to get rid of it. It's really amazing. So a lot of the enzymes we're talking about, enzymes are basically things that are going to break something down. If you put a meat tenderizer on meat, it's actually an enzyme called papain from a plant. So enzymes break things down. So the enzymes in your liver, which have all these funny names like CYP2D6, those are specific enzymes to break down specific medicines. And these guys, really geneticists, clinical geneticists, are helping us figure out how to be really scientific doctors. Because we can now get a quick blood test, find out if the person's a fast metabolizer, slow metabolizer. In pain control, people are always concerned about escalation. In other words, you take 100 milligrams of an opiate and then, oh dear, it's not working. Now you got to take 120. Oh, about dope fiend. No, it's not.
Well, and I want to add something to that. So I'm a chronic pain patient of 25 years, and I've noticed I'm a high metabolizer, and I've noticed a lot of other patients that deal with rare painful diseases are high metabolizers. Why is that, and what will this testing do for us, and how will this help with this whole, opioid crisis?
Well, here's the answer. What you have is, remember I talked a few minutes ago about a prodrug and an active metabolite. Okay, now different drugs react differently. You got to figure out, first of all, if this is a drug that when you take it, it immediately starts working, or it has to go through the liver first. So if you're a rapid metabolizer, that means you're going to break that drug down very quickly. So let's say it's a prodrug. You're going to break it down into an active metabolite. Well, that means it's going to work really fast. Okay, so you don't have to give quite as much. Okay, you have to give it more often, because it's going to break down and leave, so you're going to get a lot of it into your bloodstream immediately, okay? But it also means that where it's supposed to work for 6 hours, it's only going to work for 3. So if you were taking 10 milligrams of oxycodone and they told you to take it every 6 hours, you may have to take 5 milligrams, but take it every 3 hours. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
Well,
So
for
you
the
have to
extended
look- you have-
release. Yeah, for the extended release, for example, it's supposed to be a 12-hour thing, but really,
Right.
it's more like 8. So
You're gonna need it 8, right?
Yeah.
And see, the problem is, and you guys all know this, I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know, is that if you come off normal, and let's figure out what normal is, okay? Normal, when these big pharma does these tests, they're doing 10, 20, 100,000 people. But let's see who they really tested. Up until recently, they haven't even tried to make it look like the world. Okay, yet these are standards for everybody. It's a bunch of white folks up in northern Europe, where a lot of pharmaceutical companies are, and in the United States. And they would make it somewhat. It wasn't homogeneous. I mean, it was pretty homogeneous rather than multiracial. So if you have Indian blood in you, American Indian blood, which a lot of people do, if you have Chinese blood or Asian blood or Middle Eastern blood or any of these other things, you have no idea what the normal is for you. That's why we're trying to make it precision medicine. Okay? So what they're doing now is getting better on who they test, but it still leaves a lot to be desired.
So in Janelle's case, could she actually get an enzyme test and prove that she's a rapid metabolizer?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. So take the test, And you can go back to your doctor and say, hey, doc, all the information you need is right here in this test. This test says I'm a rapid metabolizer, therefore I need this.
Yeah,
and that's the evidence
accurate?
that he wants. Look,
Yeah,
huh?
Are they accurate?
Yes. No. Okay. So that's a very good question. They weren't active. They weren't that accurate 5 years ago, but a lot of things have changed in 5 years. Unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that are still using the technology from 5 years ago. Okay. And as we talked a little bit before we got started, I wanted to find the top company in the country that is on top of technology, and it's not really a commercial company, it's a research company. The top research company in the world in genomic testing happens to be in New Jersey. Now they do have a sister plant in China, because the Chinese realize that their metabolism is so far different than the Caucasian, where all these tests have been done, that they do a ton of their own tests for their own people. And you're starting to see in the literature all kind of stuff like, if you're Chinese, don't take niacin. That's not good for Chinese, something to do with metabolism and things like that. So this is a top. So if you're going to do one of these tests, you have to find out, the question is, how many genomes are they testing for? Okay, everybody knows about the cytochrome P450, those are the initial ones going through the liver enzymes, but that's just part of the picture. The human body is so much more interesting than just liver enzymes. They have backup pathways and it goes on. So the more genotypes you can test for, the clearer the picture becomes. If Dr. Klein, you and I are in the same generation. You remember when we went from black and white TV to color, and I can remember saying to somebody, why in the world would anybody want a color television? That you can hardly see it. It's terrible. But now we have high definition, and it's incredible. So the difference between 12 genomes and 53 genomes is the difference between a black and white TV and a high definition TV.
Could you explain
and in
to the
5
audience?
years, it's going to be so much better. Say that again.
Bruce, can you explain to the audience what a genome is?
Okay, very good. Good question. So on our chromosomes, that's part of our DNA, our chromosomes, we have little things called SNPs. They're just a little area on a chromosome. Doesn't really mean anything. I forget what the actual word is, but they're a little thing called a SNP, and it's a little area, and this controls most things on our chromosomes, controls protein manufacture, and enzymes happen to be proteins. So the genome is this little small area, okay, and we've named that a genome, and then you have a genotype. So are you a fast metabolizer or a slow metabolizer, or what are you? And so that's what we're dealing with here, is this little tiny area, and each one of those we just give a particular name to, like Dr. Klein had mentioned the CYP 2D6, which is the major one in the liver that everybody looks at initially. But there's a whole bunch of them in the liver that work for the opioids. Okay, so you not only have that, you have the 2B6, you have the 34A, the 34A4/5. There's tons of them in there. So in order to get a clear picture of where you are, okay, you got to run one of these higher tests, the ones that have the most genomes, and they'll get the most comprehensive picture that we can give right now. But
so we could say gene.
In a year from now, it's going to be better.
Could we just say genes for the audience? Do you have a gene?
Yeah, it's your genes. It's a variant.
Okay.
And so they're part of what's called normal.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Also on YouTube, someone wanted to know, where do you get this type of test? Can your regular doctor give it to you, or?
Yes, your regular doctor can give it to you, but your regular doctor doesn't know where to get it. It's not like LabCorp, Quest, or any of that stuff. I would hope you would get it through me, because I have gone to the trouble of finding the best one out there. I work with a company called Admera, ADMERA. And if you want to look them up, it's www.admerahealth.com, ADMERA. They are the gold standard. They work with all the big pharma companies. They work with all the universities. Every major, anybody who's anybody in this business does all their research through them. But they've spun off a commercial
it's a gene
product.
Company. Yeah, it's a gene company.
It's a gene research company.
Okay, so I've heard that, I hear a lot about the gene A118G, which is the gene or genome that's associated with the construction of receptors in the brain that some people think is the addiction gene. There's a company in California apparently going to come out with a gene test. Now, that's a little different than what you guys do, or is that similar?
We do a very specific thing. It's just on drugs.
Okay.
Although there are a lot of people put pressure on them and they want them to come out with a lot of other different testing. We do have tests if you have a cardiologist and you want to do some advanced tests on you, because a lot of things are different than they seem. So we do some of these advanced testing. Also in oncology, we have advanced testing that nobody else has. That looks into your genes. Unfortunately, one of my friend's daughters recently passed away at 34. They had given the kitchen sink to her, trying to get rid of her tumor. And we did one of these tests, and it showed that there was no current medication that could help this young lady, and she subsequently died. But it would have been nice if they did it 3 years before that, before they wiped out her last 3 years in chemo treatment. Because none of it worked, and she at least had 3 more years of a fairly decent life.
Decent life,
before
yeah.
They started doing this.
So give us some concrete examples, either you or Ted. Ted, you can join in if you wish to.
Thank you, Bruce. Bruce, you're doing a brilliant job. I hate to join in, but I did want to share a couple of stories.
Okay.
One of them comes to mind is a story about a fellow about a year ago. He had severe acid reflux, and he visited doctor after doctor, tried medicine after medicine, and he couldn't find any relief. He'd pop a Tums every 5 minutes to get a little bit of relief. Fortunately, he found one of our pharmacogenomic doctors. They did the test, and they determined that the only medication that would work for this man was Aspirin, which is a cautionary medicine. And the only dosage that would work for this fellow was the highest dose, because he was an ultra-rapid metabolizer. And I don't know if you're familiar with this medication, Dr. Klein, but no doctor in their right mind would start somebody on the highest dose of this medicine just off the street. So no wonder he never found any relief. Well, a couple of days after starting him on this drug therapy, his symptoms were gone. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think I was happy.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing worse than acid reflux.
So your testing helped to make that decision to go ahead with a high dose.
Our testing was the thing that found this drug therapy for him.
Okay, found the specific drug. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I learned from a gastroenterologist.
Now, one of the things we need to talk about is what's called adverse drug reactions, which are so commonplace that people sometimes think they're supposed to have these, especially in the psychiatric drugs. You always hear about a person, their adherence or their want to take their medicine and will take their medicine. They don't do. It's because they feel horrible on these medicines, even though they kind of straighten out their thinking, but they feel so bad they don't want to take them. Well, that has to do with adverse drug reactions or the side effects that these drugs cause. So if we can give them a drug that has less side effects and more effective treatment, then guess what? These patients actually take their medicines and everybody's happy. So one of the things we try to do is we look for adverse drug reactions and we find ways to get around those. There was over, and this is a real statistic, there was over 2 million people hospitalized last year in America from adverse drug reactions. That these are not street drugs. These are medications that were prescribed by, doctors, regular prescription medicines, doing the best job they could. But here's the deal. If you don't have the technology, you don't know. I myself had what's called myalgia. Myalgia is those pain, swelling, joints, muscle pain from a statin, which is really common with all the statins. And what they typically do is they reduce the dose, they change the drug. But the problem is they don't really know which way to go. So you do the test. I did the test. I told my doctor, forget it. I was on Lipitor. I'm not taking this stuff anymore. And they go, but you have you have high cholesterol. And I said, I don't care. I'm not taking this drug anymore. And just at that time, I was exposed to pharmacogenomics. And I said, I want a test. And they said, well, I've never done one, but, okay, let's do a test. So the doctor did the test and it came back. I should have never been put on Lipitor, ever. But guess what? Crestor, another drug, same class, works just fine. And I've been on that and have had zero problems. But I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have had the same myalgia from statins to the point where they just refuse to take them. So,
we have a few questions.
And you know what? I've never seen a case where one statin didn't work just fine.
We have a few questions from YouTube. Pain Advocacy Coalition asks, could you address low metabolizers and being unable to tolerate many medications and how that vindicates patients from being labeled non-compliant when really they can't metabolize?
Well, once again, is it a prodrug or an active metabolite you're taking? Okay. If it's a prodrug, like, we talked about Plavix before, what it means is it goes in and comes out and never changed. If you're a low metabolizer, it never gets metabolized or very little of it. If it's the other way around, okay, where you have a active drug and it's a poor metabolizer, it's going to stay in your system. Okay. And what happens is it doesn't come out like, you take one every 12 hours or once a day. At the end of the day, when it's all supposed to be gone, it's still there. And over weeks, months, you build up to where you have a huge amount of this drug, way more than a normal person would ever have in their system. And that's when you get the toxicities, when you get the very worst adverse drug reactions. This is where people die. Okay, this is very scary stuff if you're a low or slow metabolizer and you're given an active drug. That's where it becomes very toxic, and things like digoxin, which is a poison. Okay, it was used as a poison for probably 500 years until they found out they could get really micrograms, not milligrams, but micrograms of the stuff. If that builds up in your system, you're dead. Okay, and we do kill many people in this country every year from adverse drug reactions, but hey, Dr. Klein knows that stuff's hushed up. Oh, we don't know what really killed him. Oh, it was an accident. We don't know. But you work in a hospital and you see this stuff every day, and it's sad. So you have to be your own advocate. Now, one of the things that pharmacogenomics does for you is gives you the ability to have a second opinion on your doctor's ability to choose drugs. Now, everybody says, get a second opinion. Nobody does it. Why doesn't anybody get a second opinion? Because they don't want to hurt their doctor's feelings because he's taking care of them. You want your doctor to like you and do the best you can. Well, this is a great way to get a second opinion from your own doctor. And it doesn't necessarily have to hurt his feelings. You should be smart enough to realize that this makes him look like a winner if he goes in, gives you a test, changes your medications, make them most effective, less adverse drug reactions. He looks like a winner. But too many of these guys are scared, and I'm telling you, I've seen this so often. They view this as some way a challenge to their abilities. Now, I find this more in the older doctors than the younger doctors. Younger doctors don't have the experience. They know they don't know everything, and they love technology to help them learn everything.
This sounds like a lot of bunk to me.
Yeah, exactly. My point exactly.
Okay,
they have all this experience. Go ahead.
You mentioned that when somebody is a slow metabolizer, and so let's say we're giving them morphine sulfate for their pain, and so the tip-off is that they say, "Doc, it's not working," right? So then we give them more, and they say, "Doc, it's still not working." So we give them a high dose, and now you're saying that because it's not being metabolized, it's just floating around unchanged. And if that gets high enough, it can start to cause problems. So we clinicians need to watch out for people who are saying, Doc, the medicine, my favorite phone call is, Doc, I have medicine you gave me, it's not working. So we need to listen carefully if patients are. Now, do blood levels help with this, or do the genomic tests help with this problem of the under-metabolizer?
Well, here's the thing. The blood test will tell you there's too much in their bloodstream, therefore they have a problem. Okay?
Yeah.
But do we really want to get to the point where we just look at what's in the bloodstream? Okay? Why don't we nip this problem in the bud? And there are a bunch of pain clinics that when a person comes in, they take the test immediately. Okay? Because I'm going to be treating you for pain, and I know the FDA is going to be on my butt because that's what they do. Okay? Regulators like to regulate. So how better can I serve my patients than to do the test up front and treat them off that, and then I have all the evidence I need.
So I'm a little fuzzy as a clinician about what, so I administer this test. Is it going to give me information about how many drugs? All drugs? A few drugs?
The test that we're using currently is 311 drugs, 20 different areas. It's not just going to be pain.
Okay.
If the insurance company is going to pay for something, they'll usually pay for it once only. Okay? So let's get the most bang for our buck. Now, as you as a pain doctor need to give a copy of this to the patient and say, whichever other doctors you have, okay, make sure they get a hold of this. Make sure they look at this, especially if you've looked at it and found that there's other problems. And I guarantee you there's other problems for everybody. I mean, I'm about as white a guy as you can be, yet my great-grandmother was an Eskimo from up in Norway. So I have Asian blood in me, so you could never tell.
Bruce,
you are from the Northland?
Yeah, man, I got all my second cousins live in Norway.
Okay.
Does insurance cover this test? These tests?
Good question. Some do, some don't. Some policies do, some policies don't. Medicaid in 19 states do. Medicare pays for it everywhere. There is one of the reasons I use the company I use is because they do not charge the patient. Okay, if the test is always done and given to the doctor without any question. Test is always paid for and done by our lab. It's a research lab, so they're getting something out of it. They're getting the research out of it. That's very important. So it's not like they're getting burned if the insurance company doesn't pay. But if the insurance company doesn't pay, then they just eat the cost.
If a patient has to pay for it, I mean, what are we talking about here? Like $100, a few $100?
Patient never pays for it. But
never.
No, it's more in no, not with my company. Other companies, it could be anywhere from, $500-600 to $1,000, depending on how good a test they do.
We're going to take a quick call. Caller from area code 262. Welcome to the Doctor's Corner. What's your name and what's your question for Dr. Klein, Ted, or Bruce?
Hi, doctors. It's nice to hear about the pharmacogenetics. This is Dave from Wisconsin. I recently was diagnosed with heart disease, I believe from atrophy from being cut off opioids and losing all my ability a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, I'm a smoker, so I don't think I could ever prove that it was from the cessation of opioids. However, I think I'm a middle-of-the-road metabolizer, and ibuprofen and aspirin always were good for something. Well, they gave me metoprolol, the potassium sparer, solenoid something, and Lasix, and said I couldn't take ibuprofen or aspirin.
Is the other one.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Spironolactone. Yeah, okay.
Or aspirin anymore. And I was wondering if ibuprofen would clear fast enough so I could take it, on the other side of the day. Like, can I get 12 hours of ibuprofen and then trust that it's cleared for the heart medications? Thank you.
Well, okay, so here's a question. You're would you say a slow metabolizer? Did he hang up?
Yes, he did. Yeah, he's a mediocre.
Just because you're a slow metabolizer in one area does not mean you're a slow metabolizer in the other area. Okay? Many areas you could be normal. Some areas you could even be faster. Okay? So no just because I know I'm a slow metabolizer with oxycodone does not mean in my cardio drugs is the same way. It doesn't work that way at all. Every drug is different. And even in the very same class of like high blood pressure medications, you see variants where you should never take this drug, and the next one that looks just like it, everybody uses it the same, may work or not work depending on that drug. So that's why, see, he said something interesting he didn't know. He said pharmacogenetics. Pharmacogenetics is the study of one variant with one drug, okay, which what we know now means nothing because there's many variants with many drugs. That's where we get pharmacogenomics. So we want to look at the entire picture, not just a single gene like the cytochrome P450 genes. We want to look at all the different genes that affect the use of that drug and that drug class. So that's why we have a very comprehensive report, because that's the only way you can see a clear picture of everything. So yeah, he needs to do a test so he can really figure out what's going on.
Sherry Lacrosse asked, does your doctor have to RX the genetic test and the high metabolizer test? Or can you just walk
Say
into...
that again, I'm sorry.
Okay. Sherry asked, does a doctor have to prescribe the genetic test, or can you just go in and get it at a lab? Or how does this happen? How do you get it?
No. Most... the highest amount I've ever heard of anybody having these tests, about 3% of the population. Okay, so very few people have had these tests. Doctors don't typically do it unless me or one of my guys have gone to see them. Pharmacies are starting to do this thanks to me. We're opening up major independent pharmacies all over the country that'll be doing this in conjunction with the local doctors. This will, within the next year, should probably be over 1,000 independent pharmacies working on these tests and working with doctors to do this. That's all through Admira. But if she wants to know more and how to go about getting a test, she probably should go to Ted's website. Ted, why don't you give everybody your website so we can get them set up and do the test? Because they can't walk in there. The doctor has no clue what's going on.
Sure. Just visit DNA MedMatch. That's DNAMedmatch.com. Or you can call 410-234-2005. There's a 2-minute message there. Leave your information. And we'll be happy to advocate for you to help you reach out to your doctor, provide you with written information you can present to your doctor, and do whatever we can to help your doctor understand the importance of this test and how it could benefit you.
Once a doctor's done several tests, they continue to test multiples of their patient. The key part is get them to do one test, and then all of a sudden their entire opinion about pharmacogenomics, which they might have read about 3 years ago in some medical journal, changes, and they start testing their patients. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Seeing is believing.
Who's behind the basic development of all this?
Well, it was all a spinoff of a human genome project. Now,
okay.
That's a great question, because there is a direct answer to who is behind this. Okay, and it's a very political answer. President Obama in 2015, if you want to go back and look at his State of the Union address, he talks about his precision medicine initiative, in which he gave $100 million in grants over to universities and research labs to start pharmacogenomics on a individual basis. Before that, it was pretty much theory. Nobody, the research companies were fooling with it, and Big Pharma was fooling with it, but nobody was actually doing it. So President Obama, or whoever in his administration who put this together, but he was the guy who really spearheaded this and got it going. He's the guy that got Medicare paying for it, which makes all the difference. And it is true. I mean, they've done the research that in the there's a cost to do the test, but in the long term, the amount of money it saves is the test is negligible. And if we have a minute, I'll tell you the great example of one's coming out right now. I was at a conference where one of the big pharma companies that does a lot of depression medication, antidepressant medication, came out with this new nasal spray. Now get this, Doc, you're going to love this one. It's ketamine. It's a ketamine nasal spray.
Heard of it? Yeah.
Okay, for depression.
Right? Oh, okay.
What's
Depression.
that?
I thought it was the incest one, the nasal spray, the fentanyl
So here's the
one or
deal.
something.
The cost of this thing is $600 a dose. Okay, and the FDA has said, it's come out on their little information, that it should be, you should use it after 2 failures using current antidepressant medication. Just 2. And how many antidepressant medicines are? Probably 20, right? Well, if you do these tests, you can see that there's so many failures of that. That's why psychiatrists love pharmacogenomics tests, because it takes them so much shorter time to get people back to normal and back to work and off depression and anxiety, because these tests are really important in the psychiatry world. But now they're willing to spend $600 every week for weeks, and then it finally goes to every 2 weeks, and then finally to a month and thereafter. These side effects are insane. You should hear the side effects are so bad, and the addiction is so bad on this stuff. It's ketamine, for crying out loud, that the patient can never touch the drug. The drug has to go from the pharmacy over to the doctor's office where it's given. Okay? Yet, when I said to the sales rep, why don't they just do a test and find out if there's any of the ones they haven't used yet are probably going to work? He went ballistic. Oh, that's a stupid idea. I'm going, what? You're going to do a little swab with no side effects and find the ones that do work, not the ones that don't work? So pharmacogenomics is here to stay. It's just too efficient to not use it on a regular basis.
In the last couple of minutes, I want to see how this ties in to our current thinking about what we call type 2 addictions. There's 3, opiates, nicotine, and 5% of alcoholics that seem to have an adverse drug response to at least the opiates and the alcohol, leading to intense seeking of substance without regard for consequence, which is our definition of type 2 serious junkie type addictions. How does this all fit into that? Or does
That's a great question, and it's probably going to come from somebody a lot smarter than me. We can look into these tests and we can make the dosing proper for that individual. But we also know that there's a lot of things we don't know. I mean, let's face it. That kind of specialized attention on a personal basis, that's probably going to be, one of my best friends has been doing rehab and work for alcoholics and drug addiction he's 80 years old. He's still at it strong. And he has the biggest question. I guess his life's work, he thought he was going to solve the problem, and he scratches his head and says, I don't know what to do. I can do the best I can do, and I haven't figured this thing out yet. So
yeah, it's a big.
There's
Ted,
a lot more figuring that needs doing.
Ted, you still there?
I am still here.
You got one more story you want to tell us before we wrap it up?
I have 2.
Okay.
I'll tell them quick. One of our reps, he recently was put on 4 new medications, 4 new meds at one time, and he said to the doctor, if you're going to put me on these meds, can we please do a pharmacogenomic test to make sure? The doctor said, sure, we do that here. And he said, well, I'd rather you do a test. I'm a representative for this company, and I'd rather you do my test if that's okay. Well, they did this test on him, and it turned out that 3 of the medications they wanted to put him on were wrong. The 4th one needed a dosage adjustment. I thought that was incredible, and that's how powerful this test can be. 3 new meds that were wrong, it could have put him into an adverse drug event. So fortunately, he was saved from that.
And you get one more.
The other story. It has to do with your pain patients. Pain patients, unfortunately, suffer from the problem that doctors often consider them drug seeking when really they're trying to avoid sickness from a side effect. And what is a side effect? It's an adverse drug reaction. So if your pain patient might appear non-compliant, maybe the source of the non-compliance is an illness that they're having from the drug itself. And by performing the pharmacogenomic test, it could potentially show them a new pathway for that drug therapy to work for that patient.
Yeah, because as a clinician, the variations amongst our opiates that we have to treat pain is absolutely enormous. People break out in hives and then you give them something else and they're fine. I had somebody the other day, she was taking 30 milligram oxycodone, getting nowhere, and gave her 8 milligrams of dilaudid, which is equivalent to about 20 of oxycodone, and knocked her out. So these tests, I would think, would take a lot of the guesswork out of, here, try this, and oh crap, that didn't work, and here, take this, you got hives. So do you think that's a reasonable thing to expect?
That's exactly what it's designed to do. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
All right, so
It will.
Hey Ted,
it will do that.
would you please give the phone number again one more time and website
Sure.
where people can listen in or find more information?
Sure. You can listen to our 2-minute message and leave a personal message for me at 410-234-2005. Or you can opt into DNA MedMatch, and we'll send you some information to share with your doctor and help you to ask your doctor, advocate for you with your doctor to have this test performed.
is this
we will
reaching?
call your doctor.
Is this reaching mainstream of physicians? Because, I kind of isolated. I sit up here in my little office, and sort of semi-retired. But I do read a lot. And I read a lot every day on the internet, and I have people reading, but I haven't really run across this stuff. Why is that?
You have not looked at my website.
Oh, I'm going there as we speak.
At the bottom of the website, there's a list of the different hospitals: Johns Hopkins, ICANN, Mayo Clinic, Duke, Cleveland Clinic. How many more can you name, Bruce? Probably a dozen.
Most of the major hospitals. I went to the library at the hospital the other day and I had the librarian just dig up some current articles for me. It was like 70 current articles, and I said I want them all from major medical journals. And there's just tons of stuff. It just depends who you are, what you read.
Yep. Okay, very interesting.
I want to compliment St. Jude's because they're the first hospital to test every single patient, and certainly children. Many of them are nonverbal or at least have a difficult time expressing themselves. How critical is this test for them?
Can you use this for chemotherapy?
Absolutely.
Big time, yes. In fact, my hospital, University of Maryland, there's an advertisement, and they talk about they use precision medicine as a euphemism for pharmacogenomics, but they do that on virtually every patient. They run these tests. Hopefully they'll be running them through me shortly.
And is it a wonderful correlation, a medium correlation, a sometimes correlation with the clinical outcomes? You pick drug X for your chemo, and then nothing happens. What is the reliability coefficient?
Well, it's really good. I mean, understand that even the insurance company begs them to do these testing because the chemotherapy costs a fortune.
Right.
And you have a time crunch. You only have so much time before the metastasizes and everything else come into play. So if you can get the right drug in the right dose initially, you have a much better chance of living.
Of course.
Therefore, pharmacogenomics is tailor-made for this kind of patient.
Yeah, this is really wonderful. I'm glad you guys came on because I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot. And if they want more information, the DNA, what is it again?
DNA Match.
Med Match. Okay,
Yep.
go there and learn more about it. And
Yep, I posted it up on YouTube, and also I will put it, or I'm sorry, yeah, YouTube, and I have it on our website, and I'll be putting it out on social media again, so, along with the archive show.
well, look, thanks for
We haven't
coming
scratched
on.
the surface. We haven't scratched the surface of what we can share. I'm sorry we only had an hour and we're running out of time.
Yeah. So,
But thank
but
you for
anyway,
inviting us. I really
yeah.
enjoyed it.
This is wonderful.
Dr. Klein, and I really enjoyed meeting you. You're my kind of doctor, I've got to
Oh.
tell you.
Geez, well, I'm from Maryland too, and the fact that you're my brother-in-law really helps, with these accolades,
Tell sis I said hi.
All right, well,
All right.
next time I have a crab cake, I'll think about you, but I'll have you know, I do not eat crab cakes outside of Maryland. So
They're not worth eating outside of Maryland.
they aren't, in North Carolina here, we get tons and tons of blue crabs, and I don't know what's happened, but
I know, I have to be careful what I say. Okay.
well, anyway,
Well,
They got it. They have to discover Old Bay.
yeah, that's true.
There you
Yeah,
go.
they got this fake stuff down here that,
All
All
right.
right, guys, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ted and
Enjoyed
Bruce,
it.
for joining us this evening on the Doctor's Corner. Just a reminder to tune in Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for DTP Rally Talk Show with Claudia Morandi. A big thank you to our audience for taking some time out of your evening to join us here on the Doctor's Corner for your daily dose of truth. I'm Janelle Elgaway with Dr. Klein, signing off until next Tuesday. Have a great evening, Call Nation.
This has been The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Klein and Janelle Elgaway. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved.